What is going on, everyone? Today I wanted to talk to you about AMD Vega and whether or not you should be concerned about the numbers that we're seeing so far coming out from a few review outlets on the Vega Frontier Edition, when we all know that the RX Vega cards are not set to be coming out later this month, which are going to be directed right at gamers. So far, the reviews that have come out, most notably from Gamers Nexus and PC Perspective, who went out and spent their own money to pick up these cards so that they could provide these early reviews on the Vega architecture. And a lot of people have been concerned in the aftermath of these reviews because it's delivered performance that a lot of people, they were maybe expecting more than what we're actually seeing, which is around somewhere between 1070 and 1080 performance. But then obviously the argument from a lot of people is that this is, a pro card, or it's not a gaming card and it has been optimized for games. And how much is that actually going to affect the RX cards once they become available with optimized drivers? And what we're probably expecting to see higher clock speeds than what the Frontier Edition has, which has a boost clock of 1600 megahertz. And I guess we could start there with the clock speeds, which is probably where Vega is going to see its biggest gains in terms of performance. I think we will see some as far as driver optimization goes, but I think the bulk of it is going to be from increased clock speed. So if Frontier Edition has a boost of 1600 megahertz, where would that likely put the RX cards once they come out? I don't think it's that unrealistic to assume that with custom-cooled variants from the add-in board partners like Gigabyte, Sapphire, MSI, Asus, all of these guys putting out their custom PCBs with their dual fan, triple fan heatsink designs and all of that we won't be able to see these cards pushing up around maybe 1700 megahertz. And if you consider overclocking as well, that also could be a very realistic goal, to be seeing these cards somewhere around 1700 megahertz, with a custom cooled card. Right now, all we have is the Vega Frontier Edition, which has an arguably shitty cooler, a shitty blower style cooler, which AMD has really never done well. I mean, do you remember the R9 290X when that thing came out? It was a straight up leaf blower pushing 95 degrees Celsius. It was all the beams were glorious, but the card just ran hot as shit. Once we got triple fan heatsink designs from companies like Sapphire with their Tri-X coolers, temperatures came down quite a bit, and it wasn't really that much of a concern anymore. But with those leaf blowers on there, yeah, it's going to be an issue with clock speed. You're probably not going to be able to hit as high as a frequency that you would like on those cards. So that is certainly one thing to come into play where Vega might be able to make up some ground in terms of the benchmarks that we are seeing. Now, there has been quite a bit of gaming benchmarks run, which, like I said, show it somewhere between 1070 and 1080 performance. But one of the ones I really wanted to focus on is the one I discussed in a previous video, which is Firestrike, which I understand is a synthetic benchmark, and most people don't want to trust synthetic benchmarks. But the real benefit I feel with that is that, especially with Firestrike, is that it's on DirectX 11. It's on an older API, which has already been optimized for ages ago. So I really don't think we're going to see a significant gain there apart from clock speeds, not necessarily driver optimization, at least when it comes to that specific benchmark. And on that benchmark, with its graphics score, it is just behind the 1080. And I do mean it is really close behind the GTX 1080. And I don't think it's outrageous to assume that with a bump up in clock speed of maybe 50 to 100 megahertz, it could be tying the 1080, or in some circumstances, even maybe just beating it by a little bit. So with all of that, with all that said, should you be concerned about Vega? No, I don't really think so, because AMD has never really billed this as a 1080 Ti competitor. I've never really thought of it as a 1080 Ti competitor. It's just kind of a shame that it's taken them this long to get these cards out, which really comes down to their persistence with sticking with HBM2 and the low yields that that's had and the high cost of manufacturing HBM2. So really right now what they're in a position of is trying to compete with a card that's already been out in the marketplace for a year, which is not the first time AMD has done this. If you remember back, the R9 390, which was a competitor to the GTX 970, came out a full 9 months after that card had launched. And it was arguably and objectively a better card, which has gotten better over time with its driver optimization. I just tested it back at the end of 2016 against the GTX 970, and it handed it a pretty convincing beating in all the benchmarks that I ran on the games that came out just last year. So it has aged a little bit better, like that AMD fine wine technology that we all like to joke about. But it really has. It got better over time with drivers, and it ended up being a better card than the 970. But that didn't stop the 970 from being one of the most popular selling graphics cards of all time. It was on the top of the Steam charts as the most used GPU until back in May, just a couple months back in 2017. So really what they're seeing there is that the 970 was just out in the market for so long ahead of the 390 that anyone that needed a graphics card at that price point had already bought a card. So there really wasn't no need to go out and buy a 390 even though it was better. So if they come out now with the RX Vega card and it's priced at $499, the same exact price as the GTX 1080, where does that leave them to go? I mean, you're competing with a card that's already been out there for a year. Anyone that already wanted to buy a $500 card has likely already bought one. Sure, there are going to be some people that have been waiting, forever for Vega, but with Volta being right around the corner, it's going to be like, well, should I just wait for Volta now? But that's always the thing with, PC hardware is should you just really wait for the next thing? And if you just sit there and keep waiting, then you'll just be waiting forever and you'll never have a PC built. So I really don't know where AMD is going to go from here, if we will see a really strong competitor. I think that what they're going to have to do is really come out fighting with the price. They are going to have to beat the 1080, I feel, as in the price to performance category and come out below $500. And also, we're going to need to see a lot of these cards available upon launch, because right now, with the current scene with mining and all of that going on, and AMD cards and now even NVIDIA cards like the 1060 are just being bought up like hotcakes, you can't even find these things anymore. So if AMD can do that, if they can get out a solid number of cards at launch so that gamers can actually get their hands on them, then I think they might be in a good position, but they are going to have to be very competitive against the 1080 in price. And I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to do that with the high cost of HBM2. We just won't know, unfortunately, until a few more weeks at SIGGRAPH when we're expecting to see these cards launch. And then sometime in August, we'll have the custom-cooled variants from the add-in board partners. And I'm excited to see what AMD can do here in this space. And obviously, they're going to have their fans. They're going to have the AMD fans that are going to go out and buy these cards regardless, because they just want to support Team Red, which has been doing amazing so far in 2017. I believe they just talked about, they just had like one of their highest quarter increases, in recent years against Intel. So they are doing great as far as the CPUs are concerned. The RX 500 series kind of just went off like a fart in the wind. It didn't really do that much because it was just a refresh of the 400 series, and they all pretty much just got bought up anyway by miners, which could very well be the fate of RX Vega once those become available, especially if they are competitive in terms of price. So there's really so many factors to consider here on whether or not it will be a success for gamers. And really, like I said, I think it's going to come down to the price to performance cost and what they'll be able to do against the GTX 1080, because I'm not expecting this to beat the 1080 Ti. And if you guys are out there expecting it to beat the 1080 Ti, then you're probably going to end up being disappointed. But you really shouldn't expected that to begin with, because as they've been building this card for the past year, they've been testing it against the 1080. Remember back in December, they put it up against Doom against the GTX 1080 because the 1080 Ti wasn't available yet. I covered this back when the 1080 Ti was coming out, that NVIDIA is probably coming out with this card because they know Vega's right around the corner and they want something that's going to beat it. They don't want to have a card on the market that's, neck and neck right there with their top-end gaming GPU, not considering the Titan X. So they wanted to put out something that is going to beat Vega, which is what the 1080 Ti was all about. They just held on to a little bit of performance and then said, okay, we'll go ahead and release that, but it's priced accordingly. I mean, you're paying over $700 for the 1080 Ti. So if I would never expect AMD to come out with a $500 or sub $500 card that's going to beat a $700 card. It just wouldn't make any sense for them to do that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts, as always, down in the comments below on this discussion. I really do look forward to reading your comments and interacting with you down there, as always. And if you did enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like on it and subscribing if you're not already. And if you are already subscribed, if you're a long-time viewer, you can always hit that notification bell right down next to the subscribe button so you know whenever I'm uploading new GPU reviews or tech videos and just kind of discussion pieces like this one here today. So I will catch you guys next time. Turtle.